Nerdrotic.com.
So, Night of the Seven Kingdoms ended last Sunday in a very quiet, thoughtful, funny episode that we covered for 3 hours. And we could have gone longer. Good television, good writing, respect for the audience is still out there. And it is inexplicable that we get a traditional hero story from a George R. R. Martin world, and we have Lord of the Rings being produced on Amazon, and it is the most subversive fucking shit out there. It is just, we live in such a weird time. But the Dunk and Egg story, as we've talked about a million times, are a side story, and they do something really different. It's one POV from George, because A Song of Ice and Fire is multiple POVs, and then Fire and Blood is just a history book. I'll be critical of George all day long. He's a lazy, fat piece of shit who owes his audience the truth that he's not ever going to fucking finish. And he's been stringing them along. That's my biggest criticism of him. But the man can write dialogue. And this adaptation, while not 100% accurately done in the progression of the story, it was very faithful. I do have like some criticisms of it, but they're minor. Does it benefit a little bit because we're in a sea of fucking sewage right now? Sure, but I still think it is a great series. And I think it would have been a great series 10 years ago when things were better. I don't think any of that would have changed. It's now averaging worldwide, Ryan, 25 million viewers. Wow. So it's grown a lot in popularity, and I think people will continue to watch it. And honestly, I think it will be better binge. As a matter of fact, I watched it all back to back, and it was fucking great. I can't wait to do it again. And it's like watching a little bit of a longer movie. I'm so happy with this series, and the rewatchability on it is great. It just had both book readers and new fans in mind. So when you're listening to Egg mostly, and you recognize immediately that he's not answering questions directly, even right at the end, that last line.
Are you mad?
Is that relevant?
You know, when
oh, yeah.
Oh. You know, it's like little stuff like that. You know, Sweetfoot. When they sold Sweetfoot, it's a tough scene to watch, man. It's a guy selling a fucking horse, and it has more meaning than anything I've seen in the last calendar year.
And that was one of the changes that they made, was getting some resolution on Sweetfoot.
Yeah.
And having Raymond buy him, and like the best ending for that horse possible. He gets to go live on a fucking apple farm. Like, come on. It's going to be great for him. So I really, really liked the series, and it certainly got me reinvigorated in those stories. Again, it'd been a while since I'd read the Dunk and Egg novels, which I've always felt were really good. The Hedge Knight, probably the best. But I've since reread the second and third novellas, which are all George has done because he's a fat, lazy pile of shit. But
sorry, what's the thing?
But God, those are
George, sorry, my bad.
But those are so good as well. And Sworn Sword's going to be interesting. When they get to Mystery Night, it's going to be absolutely wild. But yeah, I thought it was really well done, and some of the changes not as keen on, but I think overall about 80% of the stuff that they added to this that was not specifically in the book, I liked, you know? But at its core, the reason this was so fucking good is because it is such a nearly direct, word for word in most times, adaptation of the source material. That's at its base. That's at its core. That's probably about 2 hours of the show. And then I think there's another hour of the show where some embellishment, some additional tag on to maybe something that was said, and maybe some things that were just totally created for the show. I think about 80% of that works pretty well.
Well, and not only that, enhance the story and the themes. Like some of the stuff they added, you know, and like Dunk gets a proposition by someone, which adds a really good layer of conflict for it. They added some great, you know, fun stuff with Lionel Baratheon. And then some of the stuff they added with this last episode with Egg and the darker scene, I thought that was really impressive with what they were kind of playing with and what could eventually result with Egg if he doesn't make this choice of going with Dunk. I'm thoroughly impressed by what they did in this adaptation.
Having not read the novellas, and I've enjoyed this series immensely, it makes me want to go and read them. And what could have been a potential very boring episode, which is the epilogue of what we've just seen, it was very heartfelt and very well done. And I really like what they did at the end when they're riding off and there's Penny Tree with them. And he veers off to the left, and you know,
beautiful.
Dunk goes and glances back, and it was just so well done.
There is a kind of unexpected baseness to this show, especially with this last episode, which is basically kind of a message of the need for young men to have positive male role models. And without that, they can go completely off the rails. But if you have a good, strong male role model, they can teach all the values you need in life to stand up and do the right thing. Dunk had it, and then Dunk is that for Egg. And Egg realizing that that's what he needs, otherwise he can see a potential darkness in him, is brilliant. It's actually a really good message that we just, you don't see that level of baseness in shows these days.
This is what House of the Dragon sometimes misses with George is like, he's definitely a male feminist, but he writes his characters with complexity so they're not all perfect. In the final episode with Maekar, they just spent the episode saying he's probably not a great dad, but he's not like completely evil. Like you see that he loves his son. He cares about his son. Deep down, he knows he's fucked up and probably isn't the person to raise his son. He was like the MVP of that episode at the end.
He doesn't have like the capability to do it, likely because of the way in the situation that he was kind of raised in. And you do have Baelor and Maekar, very different people, very different brothers. And one of the reasons was because Baelor was always supposed to be king. He's always the one that gets praised. He always gets this. Whereas Maekar was constantly in his brother's shadow and chasing his brother and never getting the same recognition for the things that he did. He was a good warrior. Not as good as Baelor, but he was a good warrior.
He's good, yeah.
All of those things. And that has defined Maekar's existence. And I do wish that we would have had the, his actual personal sigil with the 4 Targaryens, because it represented he was the 4th son. He took that on, right? That he is the 4th son, the 4th child. Like that meant a lot to him. And he wants his children to live up to what he thinks the expectation should be. And in that sequence where you see him, he's my last son.
Yeah.
And he's got 3 living sons, one who's going to be a maester, one who's a drunk fool, one who's an absolutely vile, evil piece of shit. And Egg is the last chance for him to have someone who he thinks best reflects what Targaryens are supposed to be.
It's been a little while since I read the book. At the end, he doesn't realize that Egg has gone off with Dunk. I'm trying to remember if that is the same as in the book, because I don't remember that being the case.
No.
And I did thought that it's one of the changes that I thought I see why you did it, and it's good for Egg's character. I do think it slightly takes away from Maekar's own realization of like that this is the right thing to do, and it is kind of a sacrifice he has to make for the greater good that is his son's future.
It's interesting because when you read The Hedge Knight, you absolutely get the feeling that Maekar knew and acknowledged and let Egg go. That scene where Maekar freaks out is not in the book. It was a funny scene.
It was funny.
However, after Ira Parker said something, I looked into it. There is not like a line from Maekar that's like, okay, that's fine, you can go. There is a way in which that exact situation could have happened in The Hedge Knight, and it could have been like that.
Mm-hmm. So is that the ring?
Well, look, when it comes to the ring, and only people who have maybe know a little bit more about the other stories will know, but there are screenshots that show Maekar's jewelry present in one scene and not present in another. So yeah.
They're going to have to resolve it at some point because it is important for future stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If you feel like it ended this way, and if you think that, you can think that Maekar ran them down and confronted them. You can think that Maekar realized this is probably his best for him and let him go or whatever. Sworn Sword and Mystery Knight can still go down exactly the same way.
Yeah.
Like it honestly can. It feels different than the feeling that is implied in the book for sure.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily mean it completely is. You know what I mean? When you actually reread that in mind, potentially it could have happened that way.
It could have. And the good news is we'll get another one in a year. This is going to be annual because it doesn't require a bunch of effects and it's pretty much at one location. Now, next season, there will be a little more to it because now that they've already established flashbacks, we're probably going to get a ton on the Blackfire Rebellions.
I hope so.
Yeah.
But then they could probably do that and still keep the effects and the overall budget down. Just sure. One of the things that all the Game of Thrones shows have done reasonably well is just cutting to the aftermath of the battle as opposed to the battle itself. All you need to do is plant a bunch of dead bodies and upended swords in a field with some smoke. And actually, you've told much of the story that less artful shows would have told way more expensively by showing the entire thing. Because I think one of the things that's been so refreshing about this is, how quick, short, and generally concise all of the episodes are, you know that they are getting absolutely the most amount of bang for their buck. They are not going out of their way to make it unnecessarily expensive, complicated. It doesn't need to be any more visually impressive than it is, because it is a ground up view from a knight who's a very normal guy. You would lose the effect if you started cutting into huge battle scenes in flashbacks. So I sort of hope that they carry it on pretty much exactly as they've done this season. Do not up the budget. Don't spend more on effects. Just keep doing it the way you've been doing it so far, because it's working incredibly well.
And there is less big set pieces than we had last season in the next book. With the exception, like Gary said, if we do get some flashbacks to the actual Battle of the Red Grass Field and the culmination of the first Blackfire Rebellion, which I do think would be helpful in general, just to see. And I think it'd be fucking awesome for some of it. But I absolutely think you can keep that same budget, put some of that money maybe for the big fight that we had at the end of this, put that into the Blackfire Rebellion flashback sequence.
Yeah, like the second book, from what I remember, is probably the simplest in terms of, like, there's probably the least action in it. I'm kind of interested to see how they handle it, even to get another 6+ episode season out of the second book, because it's the most personal in a way, but also the least happens by some distance of all three. So, like, yeah, you're right. They'll save a load of money on not staging other huge jousting tournaments. Spoilers for anyone who's running. But whether they will use that to, use flashbacks instead, I don't know.
Something that I want to mention, and just huge praise to the actors of Dunk and Egg from this first season. Flawless, better than I could have imagined, expected, wanted, and especially, is his name Dexter, the kid? Like, holy crap. Like, there are some scenes, especially like that bedroom scene, where he has some unbelievable kind of emotion that he does. I was floored. I was absolutely floored.
Just to clarify for people that haven't watched, when Shad is describing a child in a bedroom scene, he's talking about when he's about to murder his brother. I just want to put that out there.
But he is actually like really energetic and extrovert and the stuff that you see. And so for him to be able to pull off really kind of reserved, subtle, but demure emotions and sadness so well as a child actor, I was amazed.
In other shows, and the Duffer Brothers for Stranger Things explain this, for in the context of season 1, the reason the kids in season 1 are kind of good is that they didn't really make them act as characters. They cast people who would just naturally like the characters they wanted them to be. So they, in a sense, weren't doing very much acting, and that for child actors is really useful. If you basically just have them be themselves, but they're quite energetic, then you don't have the problem of trying to direct kids to be in specific emotions. Because then once you start doing that, they overthink it, or they haven't quite got body language down yet. They're very mechanical. It just doesn't function well enough. If you watch the little behind the scenes stuff, most of Egg is quite similar to the way the actor is in real life, which is really fun to watch when you watch all of the interviews. But he then proves he is actually an actor as well, because then he's asked to do something very specific, very difficult to do, that a lot of adult actors would really struggle to do, and he pulls it off perfectly. So not only is he being himself very well, but he's also playing the character when he needs to.
I usually think that a lot of the behind the scenes stuff they do for the Game of Thrones shows, House of the Dragon, whatever, it's a mistake to put so much information out there, because inevitably somebody says something really fucking retarded and it sticks in your head and all that shit. For the Dunk and Egg stuff, for the making of all of it, I would recommend anybody who likes the series to watch that too, because so much of it is very, very good. And I think you only gain respect for everybody involved in the project.
4K is available in June. Can't wait. Cannot wait for that.
Nerdrotic.com. Please subscribe.